Hello. All right, today we're going to read chapter 1 from Charlotte's Web, and then you have your questions to answer in the form on Google Classroom. So go ahead and get your book and open up to chapter 1. It starts on page 1. Before breakfast. "Where's Papa going with that axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. "Out to the hog house," replied Mrs. Arabelle. "Some pigs were born last night." "I don't see why he needs an axe," continued Fern, who was only 8. "Well," said her mother, "one of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak. It will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it." "Do away with it?" shrieked Fern. "You mean kill it? Just because it's smaller than the others?" Mrs. Arabelle put a pitcher of cream on the table. "Don't yell, Fern," she said. "Your father is right. The pig would probably die anyway." Fern pushed a chair out of the way and ran outdoors. The grass was wet and the earth smelled of springtime. Fern's sneakers were sopping by the time she caught up with her father. "Please don't kill it," she sobbed. "It's unfair." Mr. Arabelle stopped walking. "Fern," he said gently, "you will have to learn to control yourself." "Control myself?" yelled Fern. "This is a matter of life and death, and you talk about controlling myself?" Tears ran down her cheeks as she took hold of the axe and tried to pull it out of her father's hands. "Fern," Mr. Arabelle said, "I know more about raising a litter of pigs than you do. A weakling makes trouble. Now run along." "But it's unfair," cried Fern. "The pig couldn't help being born small, could it? If I had been born very small at birth, would you have killed me?" Mr. Arabelle smiled. "Certainly not," he said, looking down at his daughter with love. "But this is different. A little girl is one thing, a runty little pig is another." "I see no difference," replied Fern, still hanging on to the axe. "This is the most terrible case of injustice I ever heard of." A queer look came over John Arabelle's face. He seemed almost ready to cry himself. "All right," he said. "You go back to the house and I'll bring the runt when I come in. I'll let you start it on a bottle like a baby. Then you'll see what trouble a pig can be." When Mr. Arabelle returned to the house half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. Fern was upstairs changing her sneakers. The kitchen table was set for breakfast, and the room smelled of coffee, bacon, damp plaster, and wood smoke from the stove. "Put it on her chair," said Mrs. Arabelle. Mr. Arabelle set the carton down at Fern's place. Then he walked to the sink and washed his hands and dried them on the roller towel. Fern came slowly down the stairs. Her eyes were red from crying. As she approached her chair, the carton wobbled, and there was a scratching noise. Fern looked at her father. Then she lifted the lid off the carton. There, inside, looking up at her, was the newborn pig. It was a white one. The morning light shone through its ears, turning them pink. "He's yours," said Mr. Arabelle, "saved from an untimely death. And may the good Lord forgive me for this foolishness." Fern couldn't take her eyes off the tiny pig. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, look at him. He's absolutely perfect." She closed the carton carefully. First she kissed her father, then she kissed her mother. Then she opened the lid again, lifted the pig out, and held it against her cheek. At this moment, her brother Avery came into the room. Avery was 10. He was heavily armed, an air rifle in one hand, a wooden dagger in the other. "What's that?" he demanded. "What's Fern got?" "She's got a guest for breakfast," said Mrs. Arabelle. "Wash your hands and face, Avery." "Let's see it," said Avery, setting his gun down. "You call that miserable thing a pig? That's a fine specimen of a pig. It's no bigger than a white rat." "Wash up and eat your breakfast, Avery," said his mother. "The school bus will be along in half an hour." "Can I have a pig too, Pop?" asked Avery. "Nope. I only distribute pigs to early risers," said Mr. Arabelle. "Fern was up at daylight, trying to rid the world of injustice. As a result, she now has a pig. A small one, to be sure, but nevertheless a pig. It just shows what can happen if a person gets out of bed promptly. Let's eat." But Fern couldn't eat until her pig had had a drink of milk. Mrs. Arabelle found a baby's nursing bottle and a rubber nipple. She poured warm milk into the bottle and fitted the nipple over the top and handed it to Fern. "Give him his breakfast," she said. A minute later, Fern was seated on the floor in the corner of the kitchen, with her infant between her knees, teaching it to suck from the bottle. The pig, although tiny, had a good appetite and caught on quickly. The school bus honked from the road. "Run!" commanded Mrs. Arabelle, taking the pig from Fern and slipping a donut into her hand. Avery grabbed his gun and another donut. The children ran out to the road and climbed onto the bus. Fern took no notice of the others in the bus. She just sat and stared out of the window, thinking what a blissful world it was, and how lucky she was to have entire charge of a pig. By the time the bus reached school, Fern had named her pet, selecting the most beautiful name she could think of. "Its name is Wilbur," she whispered to herself. She was still thinking about the pig when the teacher said, "Fern, what's the capital of Pennsylvania?" "Wilbur," replied Fern dreamily. The pupils giggled, and Fern blushed. That's the end of chapter 1. I got some questions for you to answer next. First question for you. Look back at page 3. And the author describes the kitchen really well. Find where he talks about that, and what words does the author use to describe the kitchen? I notice how he talks about the kitchen table being all set for breakfast. He gives us a lot of good description words about the room smelling of coffee, bacon, damp plaster, and wood smoke from the stove. Why would the author give us so many details there? I think the author gave us that many details because it really helps us feel like we're sitting at that kitchen table. We can smell it, we can see it, we can almost reach out and feel it. It makes us feel like we're really part of the story. All right, and remember, when I'm asking questions, if you need more time, you can pause the video. So let's stop and think. We've read only a few pages so far, but we already know a lot about the characters. What do we know so far about Fern? Pause it if you need more time to think. Well, I think we know a lot about Fern. We know she is younger, right? She's the little sister. We know she is caring because she saves the pig. And we know she loves the pig because she's talking so dreamily, right? "Oh, Wilbur." She's already kind of obsessed with the pig. What do we know about Avery so far? What can we kind of tell? What can we infer about Avery? We might infer he's very rugged, right? Kind of manly, wants to be kind of like the best, and working with the things in his hands, like he had the gun and the dagger. Just kind of maybe a little bit aggressive. And we know a little bit about Mom and Dad, but we know that they mostly are supportive or caring for Fern, right? They really want her to figure out what tough work is and kind of how the world works. So make sure you do your chapters to go with this, or your questions to go with this chapter, and we'll be back later. All right, take care. See you later.